and that's intimidation of the Department of Justice, and I think that's much worse than Brennan.
And the president went very far, certainly making it political by bringing in his wife, who works for Fusion GPS, and the president was very very sharp in his criticism to both of them. Let's take a listen to the president, to the White House, while they've had contradictory reasons as to why they did revoke Brennan's clearance.
Look, I say it again. That whole situation is a rigged witch hunt. It's a total.
One of the CIA's leading experts on China says China is trying to send a message.
The Chinese do not want conflict, they do not want war, they do not want conflagration. But at the end of the day, they want every country around the world, when it's deciding its interests, its decisions on policy issues, to first and foremost side with China, not the United States.
China's goal?
The Chinese fundamentally seek to replace the United States as the leading power in the world.
President Xi making clear Chinese military power is to be reckoned with. The Chinese have some military advantages. Vice President Mike Pence revealing a U.S. military shortfall.
Hypersonic missiles designed to fly up to 5 miles per second at such low altitudes that they could potentially evade detection by our missile defense radars. In fact, China claimed to have made its first successful test of a hypersonic vehicle.
And a key Chinese advance.
China launched a missile that tracked and destroyed one of its own satellites, a highly provocative demonstration of China's growing capability to militarize space.
But it is here in the South China Sea, in a well-known feud, that the U.S. already finds itself facing off against China. Man-made islands now with airstrips and radar towers, islands capable of housing troops and weapons. It was clear when CNN's Ivan Watson joined a U.S. Navy patrol aircraft that Chinese forces warned the Americans were not welcome. The U.S. crew responded with a carefully crafted message.
I'm a sovereign and the United States naval aircraft conducting lawful military activities beyond the national airspace of any coastal state and exercising these rights is guaranteed by international law.
Thanks to Barbara Starr. Joining me right now, Max Baucus. He is the former U.S. ambassador to China. Mr. Ambassador, good to see you. So help us through this report. The Pentagon saying China's Air Force has been, quote, reassigned a nuclear mission and is, quote, likely training its pilots for missions against the U.S. So what's your interpretation of that?
Well, we should not be surprised. China's military power has been growing dramatically over the years because China wants a strong military capabilities it can put together, combined with its economic power, combined with the size of the country, to project power, certainly in Asia and maybe even other parts of the world. So this should not be a surprise.
So China responded today to this report, saying the U.S. report ignores the facts and that the U.S. should abandon its, quote, Cold War mentality.
China's military power has been growing dramatically over the years because China wants a strong military capabilities it can put together, combined with its economic power, combined with the size of the country, to project power, certainly in Asia and maybe even other parts of the world. So this should not be a surprise.
So China responded today to this report, saying the U.S. report ignores the facts and that the U.S. should abandon its, quote, Cold War mentality. What do you make of that statement?
Well, this is typical Chinese rhetoric. When I was ambassador, I had constantly reminded the Chinese that because the Chinese is growing at such a rapid rate, population 4 times that of the U.S., and military spending rising so quickly, that they had an obligation to tell us what their intentions are with respect to the world and show us what their intentions are. And their actions in the South China Sea are actions which are not good. and their actions economically with their 2025 program is not good. So we've got a huge challenge ahead of us, and the answer, I think, is very simple, at least in concept, and that's to engage China, show up. 80% of life is showing up. That is, we must be involved much more diplomatically, economically, as well as militarily. Our military budget increases are helpful, but we have to be in Asia economically. There's something called the Trans-Pacific Partnership, which we should try to put back together again. If we engage, then China will not be able to bully us.
And then finally, President Trump, tweeting this morning, all the fools that are so focused on looking only at Russia should start also looking at in another direction, China. Do you think he is referring to something other than this latest report?
Well, frankly, Russia is of great concern. From my perspective, China should be of an even greater concern because China is so much larger. Their vision is so long-term. Sure, Xi Jinping's the president, but there'll be other Chinese leaders with the same vision, close to the same vision as Xi, because China feels that their rightful place in history has to be restored, after thousands of years of being the center of civilization. Compared with Russia, Russia is only strong now, I think, because of Putin. When Putin leaves, Russia's not going to be near the force that it is today. But when Xi Jinping leaves, China's still going to be there, and it's going to be a major concern.
Mr. Ambassador, Max Baucus, thanks so much for your time. Appreciate it.
You bet.
Next, an advocate of human rights across the globe has died. Now, many world leaders, including U.S. presidents, are remembering the life of former UN
nation's history.
Good morning. As you know, this is my first day. It's like first day in school.
Annan received quite an education, serving 10 years at the helm of the United Nations. There were personal highs and lows. From winning the Nobel Peace Prize to failing his fight to stop the U.S. invasion of Iraq. Born in Ghana, Annan's university schooling included the Big Chill of Minnesota at Macalester College. Kofi Annan's in the Department of Peacekeeping. In 1994, the UN Security Council and others, including Annan, were accused by the UN field commander in Rwanda of ignoring his warnings. An estimated 800,000 people died as the world was reluctant to send troops in.
I believed at that time that I was doing my best, but I realized after the genocide that there was more that I could and should have done.
The next year, thousands of Muslims were massacred in Srebrenica as Bosnian Serbs overran a UN safe zone. Annan would Washington's candidate, Kofi Annan.
I didn't have any such dreams, and it had never happened that somebody from the system was elected Secretary General.
Annan's first term was highly rated. He championed human rights and urged the UN to protect civilians if their own governments turned on them. But it was Annan whose charm and style elevated him to international rock star status. The man and the organization accepted the Nobel Peace Prize in 2001, months after 9/11.
We have entered the third millennium through a gate of fire.
It would not be a smooth second term for Annan. Friends of Annan reported he appeared depressed and distant, unable
Of course, was the Iraq War, which as an organization we couldn't stop, and I really did everything I can to try to see if we can stop it.
A personal nightmare when a suicide truck bomb killed UN Iraq envoy Sergio Vieto de Mello and many UN personnel sent to Baghdad by Annan.
So you can imagine shock when that brutal death of my friends and colleagues happened.
Iraq brought more bad news for Annan. The so-called oil for food UN agreement with Iraq led to corruption. A report later cleared Annan, but his son Kojo was linked to the scandal. The reserved Annan erupted when a reporter engagement on his final day when Annan drew a standing ovation in the General Assembly. He never stopped working for